This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm David McDonald.
I'm Sam Merciers.
And I'm Nate Blyton.
And joining us today is New York-based composer and storyteller and Mad Coyote, Jerome Kitzke. Since his first work in the 1970s, Jerome has drawn inspiration from his personal life and what it means to be an American, especially in the 21st century, and that's a complex topic. Additionally, he performs with his own band formed in 1992, the Mad Coyote, a mixed ensemble that performs a combination of Jerome's notated music, along with free improvisation. His current release on Innova Records is the Paha Sapa Give Back. I'm thinking I said that right, and Jerome can correct me if not. Featuring works from for friends of the show Ethel, along with actor Jennifer Catherine Marshall and percussionist Barbara Merjan, and Jerome playing with the Mad Coyote. Is it the Mad Coyote? Is that the proper way?
That's right.
Okay, I saw it a couple of different times in different formats. Well, anyway, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. You left out one piece, though, that's on that concert, the huge Buffalo Nation, Bison, New York City premiere of an excerpt of that piece.
Right, and this is written a while back, not tremendous.
2011, 2012.
Yeah, but it's a very big work scale-wise.
In its full size, it's 90 minutes long. We're doing a 25-minute excerpt from the center of the work.
Wow, only 25 minutes?
Only for 34 people. So.
Wow.
Right. So you've been at this for quite a while. Why don't you tell us what got you into composing as a younger man? And I want to hear about your interest in how that couples with storytelling, because this is a very interesting aspect of it to me.
Sure. When I describe how I became a composer, it'll become a little clearer. In 1970, I was in high school, and in English class, my teacher, Mary Johnson, said we were going to be reading John Steinbeck's book, The Pearl, and she wanted to do the work on the book in terms of the analysis of it from a slightly different angle. She thought it would be interesting if some of the class members who were musical would create musical themes based on some of the human themes in the novel. And she was going around the room, and she came up to my desk, and she said, "And Jerome, I'd like you to do one." And I looked at her and said, "Well, Miss Johnson, I don't write music. What are you talking about?" She knew I played in a rock and roll band, and she knew I played French horn very badly in the school orchestra and concert band. And she said, "Well, why don't you just give it a try?" And I said, "Well, okay, I will." It seemed like an interesting challenge, and I had no idea what I was doing. And I took myself away, and lo and behold, I discovered I had some ability of a creative nature in the realm of music.
Yeah, I feel like not knowing what you're doing is a pretty important part of becoming a composer, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It was actually, that part of it was at that time, and you may all remember this from your own initial ventures, it was thrilling to be completely ignorant but excited about something that you were about to embark on. So because of that, my first pieces, I wrote little piano pieces, and I still play them to this day. I've played them at family weddings and family funerals, et cetera, et cetera. And whenever I'm around a piano, I play them to remind myself of my beginnings. But because those pieces came directly out of literature, something connected with me in my attraction to language and words and music. And not necessarily sung music, although I love sung music, but also music or pieces that had words in it that were spoken or acted. So many of my works from 44 years ago were actually somehow involved with language, whether they had a text or not. If it didn't have any language in the piece itself, it was often a piece that was inspired by a story of some kind or another, whether it be fiction or historical.
Interesting. So actually, I was just hearing about having you on as a guest has made me look at my own university. We're having actually the UNA Front Porch Storytelling Festival next week at the school, so I'm going to go to that. I wasn't planning on it before. I know.
That does sound fun.
Yeah, so, and I've been to one before, and I thought it was just amazing. To me, the interesting thing about being a composer and also embracing storytelling is that in one way, it seems unnatural, and in a certain way, it seems very natural. Mm-hmm. Unnatural to me because just music can't, just the noises can't tell a story, or at least that's my philosophy. But everyone seems obsessed with the idea, like civilians, if you will, seem obsessed with the idea of music telling a story. So it seems like a natural to me to give them music that does, in fact, use language to tell a story. And it's one of the most natural ways to get an audience into what's happening on stage. Mm-hmm. I was wondering...
There are a lot of composers who, there are many ways of looking at this. Many composers or writers about music, there are some that think that you, like you said, you cannot really tell a story without language being present in a piece of music. I happen to think that, yes, you're not directly using words to tell a story, but if a piece comes deeply from a source of inspiration that has to do with a story, or a topic that has to do with something in history or something from your personal life, you can get the vibe and get the feel of what that is about without any language being present. It happens all the time with music that's, whether it's symphonic or pop or rock or anything where there's not language, but you know that the piece was inspired by this particular topic, and perhaps it's projection, and you're taking that on, and you're imagining that it is telling you that story. But many works make people feel exactly what the composer intended when there's no language present. So,
well, I think that having a program, even if the program is just a title, which is the first programmatic element of any piece, right? Even just a very suggestive title can be enough, I think, to cue what you're talking about, you know?
Yeah.
Like, for instance, I think in the United States, your piece, Buffalo Nation, I can't hear that and think, oh, well, this is got to have some sort of political something, or there's something going on there that's culturally important because of, it's, you know, Buffalo Nation has a bunch of sort of like, you know, my trained American brain reacts to that in a certain way, maybe with a little bit of white guilt even, you know.
Well, there you go. That's a good start. And then you can actually hear the piece and hear the libretto and insert yourself into how you feel about that topic based on hearing the word. So,
right. So why don't you tell us about this work, since it's such a large-scale thing, before we move on to your new album coming out, Buffalo Nation.
Buffalo Nation, Bison was commissioned by the group Present Music that I mentioned previously when we were off the air. And it's a work that's originally inspired by a visit I had paid to the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in 1988 when I was working on a work called Box Death Hollow to commemorate the centennial of the Wounded Knee Massacre. And I remember I was about to leave the reservation, and I was sitting at Wounded Knee and just overlooking the landscape, and I started to have this imaginative little film in my head about the time when there would have been bison there. And I got very interested in the animal, and I already knew quite a lot about it, but it was the part of the story that pricked my interest the most was the numbers that I was reading about and being told about, anywhere from 30 to 80 million animals being present in as late as the 1860s on the Great Plains, reduced in the United States area to less than 400, with another 500 or so remaining in Canada. When I heard those numbers from, let's say, in the middle, 50 million, pick that number out of the air, 50 million reduced to less than 1,000 in North America in a very short period of time, that to me was an incredible thing. I knew there was a great story there. And so I started to just do a lot of reading and research and speaking to people, and I realized I wanted to create a work about this. And I had worked with the librettist Kathleen Masterson a few times before, and she's terrific. And she and I began to work on this after we got a commission from Present Music, and it took 4 or 5 years to do the work. The actual writing of the piece took me about 9 months, and Kathleen's libretto before that took a year or so, and it was a great process. And I was interested in originally just telling the story of the decimation of the bison in that short period in the late 19th century. But then it just got expanded out from that. We ended up telling the story about the animal in one form or another from its early days, before humans even existed, all the way to current day. So in the middle of the work, you have the focus on the decimation, but there are sections in the beginning that talk about the animal prior to, as I said, to human existence, and then all the way up to current day and the various political aspects of what's going on with the animal now. So that's why it takes 90 minutes. And even that's not enough to really tell the whole story. The whole story is just incredibly fascinating, and it's a dark, awful story as well. But it's the sort of thing, pieces I've been doing over the years where, as a non-Indian person, I've been interested in that relationship between the Europeans and the Indians from 500 plus years ago to current day. And I've written many pieces that have to do with that subject matter from a white standpoint, which is my whole point. It can get a little tricky. I'm not an Indian person, but what I wanted to do was create works that maybe prick the interest of non-Indian people to examine some of the stories they really don't know about and how America was created, and which includes the dark side of it too. And many of these stories are very dark. And I just, if I can have an audience listen to any of these pieces, including Buffalo Nation, Bison, and come away going off and further examining what they think they knew about this history, and digging a little deeper, and maybe even talking to some Indian people about it, I'd be considering that a success.
Yeah, I think that's. I think too often when someone has sort of a political bent behind what they're trying to do, the intent of that person is often to, sort of stick it in the face of the person they're trying to connect with in some way, rather than, I like the way you put it, like, to prick the interest of. In other words, a piece of art that makes people start doing their own investigation about this and coming to terms with their, what their own country has done. I think that's a great approach.
Right. I didn't ever want to be considered to be on a soapbox about any of these topics and these issues. Although when you write a piece like Buffalo Nation, you can't help but include your own feelings about the story, and because the story is what it is, there are going to be sections that are pretty intense in terms of the language they're using and telling what happened at this moment or that moment. But hopefully I've done that without sticking it right in your face and saying, you better do this. I never really wanted to write music like that. Like I said, and you said just now, I really like just to give people inspiration to examine an idea a little more closely.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever seen a bison in person? Curious.
Oh, I certainly have. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Many times. There actually is bison activity now in all 50 states. Oh. I'm not sure how that translates in terms of Hawaii, but there are many states have little herds, and some of the western states have large herds. And
I can confirm that I have seen them in Florida, which was very surprising.
There you go.
Wow.
There are people like Ted Turner, who has a certain political bent, and one may say what they want about him. He's been very instrumental, and he has a huge herd of 60,000 bison. And then there are the native nations that are now having bison activity on the reservations, including Pine Ridge, where I've been out on the plains in the middle of them and participated in this ritual ceremonial killing of one and then the butchering of one right there. I participated in that, wow. That kind of thing. And there's a movement afoot now to make the bison a national mammal. The eagle is, as we all know, the national symbol of America, but there's a space open for national mammal, and there's a movement afoot to make the bison the national mammal, which I think is a great idea.
An absolutely fantastic idea, because while the decimation occurred, you can really say that a lot of the country was built on the backs of those dead bison, because there was a big trade created. A guy could go out into the plains and earn a living basically slaughtering bison.
Well, that was one of the areas that caused the decimation to really fan out. It became a business, but there were other areas and reasons why that was done as well, why the killings were done. There were politics involved. There were aspects of trying to subjugate the Indian nations further by removing their spiritual and physical commissaries, so to speak. But when it became a business, it really boomed. And then when refrigeration came into play, they started to, and with the railroad, they used the entire animal. But before that, the animals were left to rot after the hides and tongues were removed, and the bones were left there. And then I've been on the plains many times, you cannot find any bison bones where you think you'd be able to with that many numbers of animals slaughtered. But that's because then another business cropped up, and that was the bone collectors who went out and collected the bones, and they were shipped off to rendering plants to be used in China and soap and et cetera and other products. So it's a fascinating story about an animal that was nearly wiped out completely, but was saved by a combination of Indian and white early conservationists.
So this New York premiere coming up, you're only doing a 20, and I'm sorry I don't have the date in front of me. The New York premiere is coming up when? May
23rd, Friday, May 23rd.
May 23rd, and we'll have a link to that and where to buy tickets and everything in the show notes. But you're doing 25 minutes from the middle. What's the focus of that section of the piece?
It happens to be the focus is the original idea I had, which is the decimation. The section is called Our Giant Hearts Are on the Ground. But the whole Bison piece, Buffalo Nation, Bison, is 90 minutes, and it's a giant rondo form, actually. There's a theme, and you all know what a rondo is, being the highly trained composers that you are, and musicians.
Sure.
Expensively trained.
It's a giant rondo form where this one theme, of course, comes back, and then there's other material, and the theme comes back 6 or 7 times. So we're doing the section called Our Giant Hearts Are on the Ground, the decimation, which is followed by Death Song, which is being sung by the great baritone Kurt Ullman. And then one of the statements of the rondo theme, and in this case, it's stated by a Hammond B3 organ with Leslie Speaker. And that's
we
followed
approve
by
of Hammond B3 organs.
Pardon?
Yes, we approve of B3.
Oh, man. I've been in New York 30 years, and I'm probably going to move sometime to one more home in my life, and I want it to be large enough where I can have a Hammond and a Leslie. I've been wanting one since I was 12, and all I could get out of my parents then was a Farfisa Combo Compact, which was a beautiful thing, but not a Hammond. Anyway, so that section, the rondo theme is stated by a great Hammond organ, B3 solo played by Will Smith, and that's followed by a partial section of what's called the Buffalo Savers. So that section is about how the animal was actually saved. So it comes out to 25 minutes, but it encompasses mostly the decimation.
Not to be confused with the Buffalo Sabres, the long-suffering NHL franchise.
Yeah. I think someone even asked me, "You're writing a piece about Buffalo
about hockey?
Doing that
about a really bad hockey team?"
Yeah.
So that piece, which was from 2011, is going to be on the concert, but you're also featuring pieces that are on your new Innova Records release.
Right.
Why don't you tell us about the new record and the pieces on there?
The new CD is called the Pahasapa Give Back, and Pahasapa means Black Hills in Lakota, and that's the title work is for 4 drum sets, large bass drum and piano. And it's an exhortation, it's a political exhortation to return the Black Hills to the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho people vis-a-vis the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. And that's a real barn burner of a piece. We're not doing that on the concert, but one other piece we're doing on the concert is called The Character of American Sunlight, which is also for 4 percussion and piano. They were commissioned by the same group over 20 years ago, both pieces. So we're doing that, and the Buffalo Nation work, and Winter Count, which you mentioned in our pre-on-the-air segment. Winter Count is for actor, bass drum, and string quartet. And that work is a large anti-war work with texts ranging from Aeschylus to Harold Pinter. And that piece is also on the CD. So the one
That's
work
featuring friend of the show, Ethel, as the performers.
Yeah, Ethel, the string quartet Ethel, and Jennifer Catherine Marshall is the actor, and Barbara Merjan is the bass drummer.
Cool.
So we will have one work from the CD represented on the concert, and the concert is also a pre-release, pre being the important word there, pre-release of the CD. The full release of the CD will be in July of this year, but right. It will be available from Innova's website after May 20th.
Right, and you can hear the excerpt we're going to play today. You can hear part of that. You can hear the excerpt more than we're going to play, actually, right now on Innova's webpage for the album.
We can do that now.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's hear an excerpt from this. Just start at the beginning. It's really cool.
Yeah, this is just going to be like a minute or two off the top of the excerpt that Innova has. But you should absolutely, if you're listening to this or watching this later, take a minute to go back and check out the whole thing, because it gives
in pre-order.
In pre-order, sure. It gives a pretty long excerpt, about a 6-minute excerpt that's absolutely worth your time. So this is an excerpt from our guest Jerome Kitzke's the Pahasapa Give Back.
The first casualty of war is truth.
So that was an excerpt from Jerome Kitzke's The Pahasapa Give Back. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Jerome. That was really cool stuff.
And that was actually, just not to confuse the viewers, the excerpt from the CD titled The Pahasapa Give Back. And
I should have said that.
That was an excerpt from the very opening of Winter Count, which is the work for actor, bass drum, and string quartet.
Yes, I should.
And it was just starting to really jam. So if your interest was piqued by that, as mine was, I listened to the whole thing this morning. So yeah, you should definitely go and give it a listen.
Yeah, the actor is about to get crazy and then launch into some Aeschylus from Agamemnon.
Yeah, it's actually cool when you do recognize the quotes, but it's also cool when you don't, because like earlier I was like, who said that? And I was like typing the quote into the Google machine to see who that's attributable to. So in addition to all these wonderful things you're doing, you also have a band that you formed in 1992, the Mad Coyote, that does a combination of notated music by you and free improvisation. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. The band can range from anywhere from 2 members on a given night up to 16 or 20. So it's a far-ranging combination of people. And there've been, and one of the great things about living in New York for as long as I have, I've met such tremendous musicians, and some of them I've been working with now for almost 25 years, and that's a great feeling. So the concerts will be, as you said, a combination of my notated music and often improvised music. And everyone that's in the band actually is very, very good at improvising, so it's a real thrill to work with these great people.
And that must be wonderful. Having known them for that long, you get to know like the kind of phrasing that each other uses and the interaction. You've had a lot of chances to try things out.
They've become very familiar with my language. My pieces, my written pieces, notated pieces, all utilize players of instruments as vocalists as well, often as body percussionists, or they have to speak or make sounds with their voices. And the people that have been doing that with me for a long time, they're pretty used to it. The new people, of which there are quite a few in this concert, it's the first time for them. And sometimes you have to coax them, and because sometimes you can be the greatest clarinet player in the world, but like most people, you're terrified of opening your mouth to say anything. So it's kind of fun. What actually happens at times, I've had this happen where I've worked with people who were very shy and nervous, and then they started doing it, and then they realized how much fun it was, and then you couldn't get them to shut up sometimes.
It's like jumping off the high dive is what I tell people. You know?
So I would say it sounds like with the speaking stuff that you're talking about with this band, even the stuff that you're writing for this sounds like it has the potential to be political, just like some of the other works that we've been talking about. Something that we've talked about on the show before is the ability of, for lack of a better word, concert music to be a part of a political conversation in a way that at least I usually think of as more the realm of popular music.
Yeah, over my career, that's a really good observation. I've run into that very confusing, at least confusing to me, feeling by writers on music, contemporary music, that somehow it's not a good thing for classical concert music to be involved in politics,
Right.
whereas it's perfectly fine for the wonderful political works that have existed for decades and decades now in popular or traditional music. I don't understand what the problem is. Music is music, and whether you write for a string quartet and an actor, or you're writing a folk-related song on guitar with voice, to me it's just music, and each one has the capability of making a point if you want to make a point about something that you feel in politics. Winter Count, that piece, that's if you listen to the whole thing and get into some of the text, there's some incredibly biting texts in that work by Harold Pinter, for instance. And also some incredibly beautiful, sad, tender texts by Walt Whitman, but they're all put together in a way to just make people think about the wars we've been having in recent years and decades. And my view on them is that I was against the wars, and now I also feel that there's really not much of a chance of these days of having anything that's called a winnable war. There are just these actions that are taken, and all these people are killed, and you end up with nothing at the end of it. And anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But I wrote Winter Count because of my feelings about the wars that were occurring. And to me, it's just as valid a platform, the classical concert music compositional world, if you have those opinions, to make them.
Well, and to go back to something that we talked about at the beginning of the conversation, we were talking about the ability of your music to express a narrative without text. I think the text that you're choosing and the way you're using it lends itself really directly to making those kinds of statements in a way that I think would be difficult to do in purely instrumental music. So I think that's an important part of that expression is the text that you're using. Do you ever include your own texts, or when I was looking through the information about this album, a lot of what I was seeing was about text from Allen Ginsberg, and you've mentioned some of the other poets and sources of your texts. Are you ever so explicit as to just write a statement and put it into the libretto?
Well, the work, the Pahasapa Give Back, the title track of the record, has a very short text that I wrote. It's almost not fair to even call it something I wrote. All the text is Pahasapa Give Back. And that first part of it, Pahasapa, is spoken again and again and again over the course of the entire work until you get to the very end where the percussionists yell, give back, and then they very tenderly say it again, give back. So that text I wrote, quote unquote, wrote. Otherwise, no, I've not written any text of my own at this point, though I like to write. And some of the difficulties I've had getting permissions in recent years to use text, I tell you, if it's not domain, I think I may start writing my own or using the work, the poems of friends of mine.
Yeah, that's the thing to do, is to just work with people you know, because it can
be a nightmare. So
it's nightmarish to work with a publisher for some of this stuff. I've had similar experiences. Do you know the poet Stephen Crane?
Yes.
Okay, he's one of those really useful guys that's right on the cusp of public domain. He's just before the copyright start date,
right.
and writes a lot about a lot of interesting things. So if anybody is listening to this and is a composer and looking for poems to set or work with, check out Stephen Crane, because you can use them for free and find them on the Google machine.
Mark Twain was one of those on the cusp writers too. Some of his work is public domain, others are not. And he has a great little piece called War Prayer, which I thought about using, but it was one of the ones that was after, and it had a permissions problem, so I didn't even bother.
Interesting. That's an interesting thing to think about. This would be a good thing for us as a website to put together is a list of some interesting poets that are just barely in the public domain for people to play around with, because there's a lot of stuff that's just after that in copyright that would be great to play around with, but is still not quite old enough. And then if you go back too far, you get into stuff that sounds like limericks and is not very interesting to work with.
Dave, there's a website, I can't remember where it is or what it is, but I'll dig it up for the notes, that actually is a post of the most recently in the public domain content from a bunch of different domains.
Well, I think it's Duke Law puts out a list every January 1 of everything that just went into the public domain this year, because things go into the public domain on January 1st.
Oh, that's great to know.
So they put out the list every year, and it's all another interesting thing they do is they also list things that would be in the public domain if copyright hadn't been extended.
If we didn't have our
the various times that it has been extended.
Yes.
So you can see some of the, and that's the really fascinating thing, is when they say, well, this famous work from the 70s would be in the public domain if we didn't extend the copyright law in 1909 or whenever that one was, in 1976 and 1998 or whenever.
One thing we need to remember too is it's often not the writer. If it's a living person, it's not the writer who gives the problem. It's often their agents or their publishers. I've done a lot of settings of Allen Ginsberg's poems, and while he was alive, he was very gracious and at giving permission, and was very easygoing about it. But I have a funny anecdote about that. I was talking with him one time, I can't remember the event, and I'd asked him for permission to use one of his poems. He was very interested. He said, "Oh yes, go ahead." And then we talked some more, and then he reached into his pocket and he pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, it looked like, and he said to me, "But if your piece starts to make a lot of money, you got to call this number." So I opened up the piece of paper. It was a telephone number, which I still have somewhere, and it must have been to either his agent or a lawyer or something. But he was less concerned about the money part of it, but not completely unconcerned.
Yeah. Well, and I have found that if you can get in touch with the poet, even if they are a published poet and you have to go through a publisher or an agent or whatever, is if you can find an email address for the poet and they are interested in the project, from their side it's much quicker for them to get you through the people that you need to get whatever letter or contract you need to get signed. If you can get a hold of them and they can say, "Dear publisher, please send this person permission," then you're golden. If you can...
Well, actually, not necessarily. I'm not going to mention names, but I recently had a conversation about a fairly well-known poet who had been asked by a composer if they could use their work, and that the poet was all for it, but the composer was having a really hard time with the agents and the publisher.
Really?
And even when the poet wrote and made phone calls and said, "Please let this person use this work," it didn't do any good, and it was still a difficult situation. So I think most of the time you're right, Dave, that does happen if you can get the poet involved, but sometimes even that doesn't help.
Yeah, every time I've gotten the poet involved, I mean, it still takes at least a few weeks to a couple of months of emails and letters, but they can actually get things moving. Anytime I've tried to contact a publisher directly, it's just a blanket no or no response or whatever. But anyway.
Jerome, I was wondering if we could double back for just a second right quick. The title of the piece that was our pick of the week, Winter Count, I looked that up, and that has some significance in terms of Native American culture, correct?
Oh, completely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can read about it from this website I found, but I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, it's a process. In fact, the best way to do it is I think I'm going to read you in the front of my score. I'll read this to you. Among several tribes on the northern plains, the passage of time from one summer to the next was marked by noting a single memorable event. The sequence of such memories, recorded pictographically on a buffalo robe or spoken aloud, was called a winter count. Several winter counts might be in progress at any one time in the same tribe, each differing according to the personality of its keeper. And that's from the writer Barry Lopez's book called Winter Count. So that describes what a winter count is.
This is just like an individual person's way of marking the passage of time, and other people might know about it, but it's not like a universal thing.
My understanding is there's a person designated as the winter count keeper. How that happens, I'm not sure. So it's that person's job, and there may be some consensus discussion about that before it's chosen. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's what a winter count is.
Interesting. Cool.
Well, I don't that. So this has been a really interesting conversation, and I know you said you had to go. Are we still okay for time, Jerome?
Oh yeah, we got about 12, 13 minutes.
Okay. All right.
I want to make sure we talk about the specifics of the concert and the information.
Yeah, tell us about this concert.
Yeah, the concert, as I said, is a pre-release concert for the CD, as well as a concert that contains the New York premiere of that large section of Buffalo Nation, Bison. It's being put on by the wonderful series called Music at First at Brooklyn's First Presbyterian Church in Brooklyn Heights. It's Friday, May 23rd at 7:30 p.m. Tickets are only available at the door. It's a very lovely low cost of $10. And for more information, you can call me at 212-567-1520 or go to the Music at First site, which is musicatfirstsite.com.
Excellent. And is there going to be any documentation of the performance? If people are, for example, in Orlando, Florida, and think this sounds interesting, but live in Orlando, Florida?
Yes. Yes, it's being not only recorded, but it's being filmed as well. These days, as composers, you might know many times. Oh, hello, somebody in the background. As you know, many times when you are trying to submit for some kind of application for some sort of either residency or a grant, they are often now looking for DVDs of the work, which is, I'm doing this a long enough time now to realize that's really strange to me. Yeah. As if the recording and the score is not enough. Now people want to see, even if it's not a theatrical work, they want to see the performers performing the piece. So lately I've been documenting visually my work, my concerts as well.
Excellent. So, can you let us know when that happens? Because we would love to point people that are hearing this later to where they can do that.
Sure. I'm not sure if the DVD, how it will be made available, but it'll have to be edited and probably will go up on the YouTube thing. I'm very unfamiliar with all these sites and stuff, but I imagine some of it will be available that way.
Well, we put all of our content on the YouTube thing too, so we will definitely be sure to link to it.
Excellent.
When that's around. So, should we move into our other things, Sam?
We should.
Whoa! And as soon as it's like I caused him to be I don't know, excised from the conversation. So
Sam is gone.
From my screen. He'll be back.
I can still hear you guys.
We lost your video. Oh, now we're coming back.
Now you're coming back.
Okay.
So we had talked last week about in a few weeks ago about the Pulitzer Prize winning work "Become Ocean" by John Luther Adams, and it had been premiered last year, which is how it became eligible for the Pulitzer in Seattle. And this last week was the very last Spring for Music concert series, which is very sad because Spring for Music was such a cool festival.
And we don't mean the last one of the season; we mean the last one.
Yeah, they're packing.
They lost their funding.
For funding, unless that has changed. The last I heard was that this was going to be the last one, which is a real bummer because they brought in great orchestras from all around the country that you don't normally get to hear outside of their local markets. And one of the orchestras coming in this year just happened to be Seattle Symphony, and Ludovic Morlo, who was part of that Become Ocean commission, came in and played Become Ocean. So it received its New York premiere just a couple of weeks after winning the Pulitzer Prize. And what's great about that is that they recorded and streamed the concert. So you can...
WQXR.
Yeah, WQXR has this. So if you are like us and don't get to usually hear the Pulitzer-winning works when they become eligible for a performance as opposed to a recording, you can now go and hear the whole thing. So often, I remember growing up as a composer and hearing about the Pulitzer announcement, and then just being totally bummed that there was no way that, like, there was a group of people that decided that this was the most important work of music that had been created in the last year. And far be it from me to get into the discussion of the value of such a judgment, but if this group of people thinks that it is important, I always felt like it was something that I should at least have some sort of passing familiarity with, and I was always bummed that I could never access that. And which is why it was nice when they started giving the Pulitzer to works that received their premiere recording in the last year. And now, even though this was eligible for a performance and not a recording, we now have at least a live performance of it, which is very cool. And speaking of John Luther Adams and recordings, we have a John C. Adams recording that is out just last week of his new saxophone concerto performed by Timothy McAllister.
Friend of the show, Timothy McAllister.
Yeah, we talked to Tim back in August or September last year. You should definitely check it out because it was a great interview, and Tim was really fun to talk to. New recording out, St. Louis Symphony, David Robertson, Tim McAllister performing this work, and City Noir, which is kind of a tone poem homage to film noir. Great pieces. Not wild about Tim's performance, actually, in the saxophone concerto. Some some intonation issues.
Well, I mean, it's
little flat.
Relentless, though. It's
on
so
the recording.
On the recording, yeah. So
I purchased the recording and listened to
Is it a live recording?
No, it's not, which is really weird, and I don't know who the producer was, but it seems like the kind of thing that should have been caught and fixed. But it's a great piece, and the problem is the stuff that's flat is right at the beginning. But if you can get past that, the rest of it is great, and the piece is great. The third movement in particular, where it's got a lot of the Charlie Parker figures and stuff, is really impressive. That's the one that's really, Sam, what you're talking about, the really relentless stuff, is a lot of that's in the third movement. So
it's
you
really
should definitely check it out.
It's nice to hear a piece for saxophone that really, is rife with bravura, but does not, in order to achieve that, stress the saxophone player out to a huge degree. In other words, slap-tonguing multiphonics, super-duper altissimo, constantly, that kind of stuff is normally these days how that's achieved, and it's just achieved through its relentlessness.
Yeah.
Because it stays in the high schooler range of the alto saxophone like 95% of the time.
Interesting.
It just is relentless.
How long is the piece?
It's like 20, 25 minutes. It's pretty big.
25 minutes, yeah.
In movements or one?
In three movements.
Yeah. But they run concurrently, I think, don't they?
I don't think there's. I think there might not be a break.
And this player's a colleague or friend of yours?
We say friend of the show for anybody that's been on the show before. He was on the show in the fall, right before
He's professor of saxophone at Northwestern.
Yeah, at the moment, that could change.
And I have worked on a saxophone before too.
So let me ask you guys this: how do I get to hear the music, your music, Three Musics?
Well, you can hear us on our sites, and
you send me your sites.
I'll send you a link.
My site's down right now, but yes.
I'll send you a link to some stuff. Nate's got some stuff up as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you have to go?
Oh, I'm good for a few more minutes.
Okay.
So anything else you want to yap about?
Okay.
Sam, you had some other stuff, right?
Quick, because they're short stories. The Met started negotiations this week, and things don't look good. Peter Geld says they're looking for 16 to 17% reduction across the board. He says that it will be shared universally between the administration and the players.
Heard that before.
Yeah, but Well, so as with most labor issues we've heard regarding orchestras and whatnot this year, it's all about. I just finished my semester, so I'm still having shock from that. It's they're hugely apart in what they want. So in the same as most labor disputes we've heard recently, it's going to be bad because both sides have vastly different ideas of how to proceed. So, but this is just the opening salvo, and I'm sure inside the next couple of months we will have Drew McManus on the show to tell us everything we need to know about it.
Yeah, and the opera is particularly complicated because we're not just talking about, one union. There's like 88 unions that are all involved, and not
15,
really.
According to the article, 15 unions are involved in the labor.
Wait, literally 15? I was exaggerating for comedic effect.
I don't know.
That's insane.
15 unions are involved in getting the job done at the Met. So, yes, the negotiations are going to be quite complex.
That's insane.
Also, we covered last week the upcoming cannabis-friendly concert that was going to be held by the Colorado Symphony, which I still maintain is a fantastic marketing idea. They've been receiving pressure from social groups and receiving pressure over whether or not what they're trying to do is exactly legal, which is kind of funny when you consider you can ask the same question about a state legalizing recreational marijuana is not exactly legal either, considering it contradicts federal law. So we're inside a huge gray area here, and what was looking to be a cool concert might not happen. However, the reason why we're talking about it ultimately is not because it might not happen. It's because some people presented what they thought would be a great program for this cannabis-friendly show. Friend of the show, Jeremy Dank, suggested Messiaen and Scriabin.
Oh, yeah. Now we're talking.
Mystical. Yeah, very mystical about their approach, Lots
if we're doing chamber music, I'd love some Crumb.
Well, Dink also suggested, and I think this is a fantastic suggestion, Gesualdo.
Oh, man.
To quote my undergraduate composition teacher, Gesualdo was either an alien or he was channeling spirits, and that's the only way he wrote that music when he wrote it.
Sure.
Depending on how stoned you are when you come, it may not matter what is played.
Sure.
Hey, I still maintain baking down and watching an orchestral concert sounds immensely fun. John Adams,
especially a very well performed one like you'd get with the Colorado Symphony.
Exactly.
That's right. I could even sit through Mozart if I were high. John Adams, who we were just talking about, suggested like a whole slew of things in an email, including Bruckner Symphony No. 8, which I have to say I don't think there's any time that's good for Bruckner unless you're trying to go to sleep. Stockhausen's Helicopter String Quartet, Messiaen, some French word that I can't say, Milton Babbitt Relata 2, which I'm actually not familiar with, and Terry Riley's A Rainbow in Curved Air, which I am familiar with.
Now that would be cool.
And his own piece, The Dharma at Big Sur. I think like John Adams, like pulsing minimalism like that would be very good for a stoned audience. They would really dig it. So anyway, that concert, though, may not happen.
We'll see.
But
we will stay tuned. And you know what I think is cool?
Speaking of things that stoners would enjoy, Dave.
What's that?
Bang on a Can is featured in a new cartoon.
Okay. Well, so you guys are familiar with Arthur the Aardvark? Arthur the Aardvark, right? Arthur the Aardvark is actually going to, or I think did, feature the Bang on a Can All-Stars in cartoon form as part of their Arts Week, and you can watch it on YouTube, which is really great. And there are actually like cartoon versions of the Bang on a Can All-Stars, which is super amazing.
And playing Bang on a Can music.
Yes, they are really playing Bang on a Can music. How cool is this?
Super cool.
This is
I think the Mad Coyote needs to send them a resume.
It's really funny. There's a banjo part in Buffalo Nation, and
like
Mark Stewart, I'm using one of his banjos in the piece, and there he was in all of his massive great hair glory.
Very nice.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So we'll have a link to that that little clip from Arthur, which is on YouTube, on our show notes, as we like to do. And then lastly, we just want to wish a nice happy birthday to Alex Ross's blog. Alex has been writing his web blog for 10 years now. So that's very cool. One of the best blogs you'll find on new music in the whole internet world. And it's one of our places that we read every day. Every time there's something new, it's one place that we always run to because he even sometimes he's breaking news, but most of the time he's just sharing some really interesting thoughts. So congratulations,
and that's friend
Alex.
Of the show, Alex Ross.
Yes, friend of the show, Alex Ross.
In other words, we've had him on the show.
We like to brag about it.
So now I'm a friend of the show.
There you go.
That's right.
That's right. Hashtag FOTS.
Right. So absolutely check out his blog. If you're not reading his blog, why are you watching this show? Because there's better things you can do with your time, and starting by reading all of his archives. But we love Alex and we love his writing and look forward to reading more of it. And I'm still waiting for this book. All right, been waiting for this Wagner book now. All right, it's been a while. Just saying. All right, that's gonna do it, I think, for the show this week. Jerome, thank you so much for joining us this week. We will have links to all of those things that you told us about for people who are interested in checking out this concert and this record. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Nate, Sam, and Dave. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
And you are, of course, welcome back anytime. It's been a lot of fun talking to you about your music and about the ideas behind it. If anybody is watching this or listening to this for the first time and you don't know, you can find the links to all the things that we talked about, including the great things that Jerome is up to on our site, soundnotion.tv/SN. We'll have links to all the things that we talked about in all the news stories we talked about, links to the Colorado Symphony stuff, links to the Met Opera stuff, and of course links to Alex's blog and, as I mentioned, that Arthur clip. So definitely do that. You can connect with us on all of the social media machines. On the Twitter machine, we're at SoundNotion as a group. Individually, I'm at Dave McDowell, Sam is at Housegoy, and Nate is at Natetree. You can also like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and do all those things. And we would love to continue all these conversations with you afterwards. If you have any thoughts on politics and concert music, we would love to continue this conversation after the show ends. If you'd like to watch this show live, we do stream the show on our site, live.soundnotion.tv, every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and you can join us in chat there, and you can participate in the conversation live. If you would like to, you can subscribe to this show and all our shows at soundnotion.tv in the iTunes Store, at Stitcher Radio, wherever finer podcasts are aggregated for free. And if you would like to support the show, tell your friends about us. You can use the Amazon affiliate links on our site. When you're buying your Amazon stuff, you can just search for it through our little search box on the site, and we get a little commission. It doesn't cost you anything extra, and it's really easy. SoundNotion's introduction includes music by Patrick Gullo and video by Tyler Lepp. Thanks again so much for watching or listening, and we will see you back next week.
Bye, one and all.
Dude.
Happy Mother's Day, everybody.